All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again for joining us. As always, I'm going to hand over to Sybrin in a moment just to give us a little kickstart, to give the intros, and then we'll kick off with the discussions with Roger. I'm really looking forward to this one. I'm not going to say too much now. We'll come on with that in a minute. Just while we're waiting for attendees to get in, and well done for getting past the power cuts. And if you're in Bryanston, we've also seemed to have a data cut as well, which is not particularly useful for a call like this. So well done for getting through that. I just want to remind you, though, please do put your questions in. And if you've got questions, put them in sooner rather than later. We always try to finish punctually on the hour. So if you get them in early, we're more likely to get them. If you're putting them in the last 10 or 15 minutes and we have a big rush, well, we're not going to go and manage that. So with that, Shiona, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Colin. And hi, everyone. Thank you for joining another installment in our Game Changers series. I'm Shiona Blundell, the Executive Head of Sales at Sybrin, and I'm standing in for our CEO, Marius, today. Joining Colin today for our session is Roger Grobler. Roger is a partner and co-founder of the Ethos AI Fund, and he has extensive knowledge and experience in insurance, data, artificial intelligence, and private equity. He's helped numerous companies, including CrossFin, one of our new shareholders, TymeBank, and Optasia, formerly known as Channel VAS, amongst others. Working with their management teams, he's helped to improve their operations through the use of AI. And I'm super excited about today's topic, Colin, the art of science and data-led decisioning and how that influences and impacts business. And really curious to hear your views. So over to you, gentlemen.
Shiona, thank you very much. Roger, welcome.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks, Shiona.
Where are you dialing into from today?
Stellenbosch. Beautiful winter's day in Stellenbosch.
That's why I'm actually thinking about putting a jumper and a coat on up here in Joburg because it's freezing. I guess you can get away with a t-shirt down there. Anyway, let's start. I don't want to go and spend all the time talking about Stellenbosch. It just gets me incredibly jealous. Ethos AI. What is Ethos AI?
Colin, my career has been spent in sort of working with businesses that uses algorithmic and data-driven decision-making in insurance, in banking, in telco. And we got to the point where so the algorithmic decision-making started to be called AI because the machines start learning themselves and adapting themselves. And we thought about how do we invest behind sort of AI as a theme. It's quite a sort of a powerful theme. And our first conclusion was that we didn't want to invest in the tools of AI, so that people actually make the tools that you use to deploy the AI with, but rather the companies that use the AI. In my experience, what we've seen, particularly with a value chain where you can deploy algorithmic decision-making multiple places in the value chain, get an uplift and then a multiplier effect on that, you can get significant increases in the value of the business. So our fund invests in sort of normal businesses, if you like. And what we've also learned in the process is that it might be normal businesses, but they've got quite disruptive business models. But let's say it's in insurance or in telco and medical technology or whatever the case may be. And then we assist those companies on the AI journey, amongst other things. So how do you think about AI? Where do you deploy it? How do you go about building a data science team? What vendors do you use? How do you engage with them? And then help them go through that journey. So we've made a number of investments to date, and I think we've been quite lucky with lockdown because the types of businesses that we invest in actually did quite well through lockdown because they're very, very data and technology driven. And we look forward to doing that for many years still to come.
Okay. And then just for people on the call, some of the companies that you've invested in that I recognize, Time,
yes,
for example, maybe CrossFin people won't know, but some of CrossFin's portfolio, they might, in terms of the merchant acquiring, I mean,
Oka and Adumo and
Retail Capital. And then what else have we got in that portfolio? I suppose actually that's not in the portfolio. That's something that you're looking at separately. I want to come back to that, but I can clearly see how Time, for example, is going to really benefit from this AI approach. I mean, they've now got 5-6 million customers. They're probably the fastest growing bank, certainly in Africa, if not the world, the way that they're recruiting new customers. So their opportunity to go and use data to actually go and enhance that services must be massive.
I think that what's quite important to understand is that you've got a business that does banking, for example, in Time's example, or we've got a medical technology business called Vertis, or Rain that's in the telco space. So the space in the industry is quite normal. Then you've got a business like Time that's got very new technology. So it's banking systems, it's all sort of cloud-driven, highly connected, very flexible. You've got data in terms of having access to data that other people potentially don't have, or your ability to use that data. But then very importantly, you've got a culture inside the business that can actually use the technology and the data to disrupt their market. And that then leads to a sort of a disruptive business model. So what's attractive about Time, it's a hybrid digital bank. So it's not a pure digital bank in that you've got a presence in supermarkets, Pick n Pay and the Foschini Group. But that lowers the cost of delivery significantly for the bank, and they can get to a much lower cost to income ratio, which puts them in a competitive position.
How did you get to this space? Let's just jump back in time now, because the message is clear, and I think we're going to go into this in a bit more detail. Data-led, AI-driven organizations, you're inferring, have a massive advantage, and certainly in some of those examples, I can't really dispute that. But where did your journey start? I mean, we're talking in the 90s, when you start to get interested in data and thinking about this in terms of a career. What was that journey?
I studied actuarial science, and we were still at the university doing some post-grad work, and the insurance business came to the university and said that they have got a serious problem. They've got a insurance license from Lloyd's, but they're running at very high loss ratios. So a loss ratio in an insurance company is the percentage of your premiums that you pay out relative to the in claims relative to the premiums that you get. And they were running at like a loss ratio of like 140%. So they get R1 in, they pay out R40 in claims, and that's not sustainable. And they asked us to help them to develop a pricing strategy. So their pricing at that stage, and it's hard to believe today, but insurance, you would have your car insurance pricing printed on a piece of paper. It basically says whatever the value of your car is, that's the premium. And they couldn't charge more because they were already at market. So we took all of their data and basically developed the first individualized pricing model in South Africa. So look at people's age, their gender, where they live, what make and model of car they drive, and so on. And they were quite brave to actually take our model, implement it immediately, and in South Africa got monthly contracts. So some people's premiums doubles, others went down. They lost half their book overnight because lots of the premiums went up.
Wow.
But a year later, they were at the loss ratio that we modeled, and they were double the size of where they were when we started. And we sort of fell into this silver bullet, me and my partner, Willem Roos. And Willem Roos then went on to be the founder of Outsurance. They went to Australia and created UE. He ran Rain for a period of time. And similarly, I've had a career using algorithmic decision making.
So that must have been quite exciting when 12 months later you can look and you can show with evidence the impact and the benefit you've brought to to an industry, to an organization at scale. Was that what got you excited and made you want to move into the insurance sector?
Well, we were suddenly very popular because we had the silver bullet. So we had like job offers suddenly from lots of different insurance companies. I went to join Hollard, and we used to have, you now have technology challenges, because how do you actually get this pricing out? So we had this wonderful programmer called Tony Malentz. I asked him what languages can he program in, and he used to like slam his keyboard and he says all of them, they're all the same. So he wrote these black boxes that we then loaded onto actual stiffy disks. And these stiffy disks will literally be delivered, 100 of them every month, to all the different places where we needed to deploy this pricing model. So this little black box went out on a stiffy disk, and then the pricing got deployed, and it worked remarkably well. And if you've got that kind of thing, then you've got such an advantage over your competitor. Fast forward to today, In some of the businesses in Australia that I was involved with, you would either get online and start your quote, or you would call the call center. And by the time that you've given them all the information that they require, that has gone off and looked into banking transactions, your supermarket transactions, and got adjusters out of that for your premium based on what they see in terms of what your risk looks like. Plus, those models self-update. So as claims come in, they actually adjust themselves. So it's become enormously sophisticated now, using very wide and big data sets.
How did you get the senior management? I mean, you mentioned a word that comes up a lot, black box, or two words, I suppose, one or two, don't know, doesn't matter. How did you get the senior leadership team at Hollard to accept? So you've created this black box, information comes in, pricing comes out, you get the 100 USB sticks and send them around so that people can actually use it. You're now in production. If you've got this wrong, that's quite a significant risk coming through. I just think about other experiences I've had in financial services. It's not easy getting senior leader and compliance teams and other risk monitoring teams to get behind new technologies. They want to understand it in detail, and it doesn't sound like this black box is something that those guys were going to extend at that point.
I mean, today we are investors, and one of the key things that we look at before we would invest in a company is whether the management team is actually up to embracing these kinds of technologies. And unfortunately, there are management teams that are not up to it, and they are not going to evolve. They're not going to evolve with us. And if you then have a disruptive business model that comes along, that company will really suffer. So if you talk about data-driven decision making and AI and algorithms, the very first thing you need to get right is the company's culture, and that does start from senior leadership all the way down. The technology and the data is not going to get you there if you don't have the right culture inside the business.
We're going to get into that in a minute. I want to know a bit more about your journey, though. So I think the first one that really stood out for me, where you were making a massive difference, and this time you're taking the credit, at least publicly, because you are the throat to choke, was with real insurance in Australia. How did you get into that? And as you go through the success and how you built this out, it'd be really interesting to hear about some of the products that you actually prototyped out there, because they were quite novel. They still are quite novel.
Yeah. I mean, I had an extremely steep learning curve going to Australia. I came out of Rand Merchant Bank, where I did financial engineering and securitization and all kinds of complex things, and I had a yearning to be an entrepreneur. And it was an extremely steep learning curve. It's very hard to come out of a large organization and suddenly step into a team that's only got 14 people. And I think some of the things that we learned, we went head on into car insurance, for example, in Australia, with very, very strong competition, and really struggled with that. But we also went into life insurance. We've got a very talented guy to run our life insurance business. Mm-hmm. And that was quite an uncontested market. So I think competition is quite a big thing to avoid. Competition can make a very lucrative opportunity not lucrative because there's too much competition. So I'll speak about the life insurance business first, and then we can talk about the innovation on the car insurance side. But on the life insurance side, in a period of, I think, about 2.5 or 3 years, we went from a standing start to selling the most life insurance policies in Australia. Wow. And the reason basically for that is that we had an extremely efficient sales process. Like all the way through our call center, we had very good systems. And at every step of the way, we were better than the rest of the market. And at one point, the biggest player in the market actually came to us, and they wanted to outsource their direct operation to us. And we did a proposal for them. And when we looked at it, the embedded value per policy on our side was 6 times higher than theirs. So embedded value is basically the discounted future cash flows of a policy. And I thought somebody made a mistake initially, but when you unpacked it, you saw that at every step of the way, we were like 5 or 10% better than they were. But these things multiply out. So we had a lower cost per lead, slightly higher, better conversion rate, higher ticket size, better underwriting, and quite importantly, better retention. And let's say you make 5% profit on a life insurance policy, if you can get all these multipliers out, suddenly we had a significantly more profitable product. And then because we had a more profitable product, we could spend so much more on direct advertising than anybody else, and still profitable for us. So I heard many years later from Google themselves that for a number of years, we were actually the company in Australia that spent the most on Google of any company, including banks and retailers and all of that. So my lesson out of that was extreme power of a multiplicative value chain. The other product.
Why were you able to do that, Roger? And the incumbents weren't? Because as you said, this was new for you. You've come out of a corporate, and now you're the CEO, founder, and having to worry about everything. You've got into a very competitive market in life insurance, and yet somehow you've managed to put a process in place where you're getting this multiplicative benefit, which is outstripping others. What do you put that down to? Was it luck, or was there some other? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that on a market construct perspective, there were 6 large life insurance players in the market, and they all had traditional distribution channels. So they distributed through brokers and intermediaries. And if that is what you do, it's very difficult for you to go direct because you alienate your distribution channel. So there's only one other entity in the market that actually had a direct operation. So there's very little competition in the direct distribution space. And then we had just incredible people. The guy that we had that ran that business, he actually built the systems himself. Incredibly incisive, data-driven thinker. So you've got these algorithms, but you also look at the process and you deeply understand the process. So if you think about AI and about data-driven decision-making, it's the data and the technology, yes, but you need to have people that can actually see through the noise, find the signal, and then pull where the big levers were. And our leader in that business was exceptionally good at that.
Let's jump into that, because I think that's really interesting. So we've got this. I mean, just looking at your career and your history, you can see just how you can use data to go and generate super profits and outstrip your competition, even in areas which are relatively competitive. How do you find these data guys, these people that have got this ability to go and put algorithms, put data components in place, but not just doing it from an engineering perspective, doing it from a business perspective, and doing it in a way which can then be exploded to actually service these customers? How do you do that? Where are these people? I've never met one.
I think there's a lot of people that can learn how to do this. I mean, if you change the culture to a culture where you use data to make decisions and instill that in the operating procedures of your company. So one of the things that we do quite frequently with businesses is have a performance meeting, and it's a weekly meeting where the senior leadership dials into a call. You take the key performance figures of the business, and you discuss it for 45 minutes to an hour. And what I've seen in those kind of meetings, because it's all sort of number driven as to what does the sales funnels look like, what does the performance levels look like, how did it change from this week to next week, there's a few fascinating things that happen. The conversation levels go up, and the use of language goes up, and the understanding of metrics go up. And then in other meetings, you start also seeing it. So conversion rate or retention rate is an important thing. It starts seeping out into the business. And the second thing that's interesting that happens is that the reporting evolves. So you'll be looking at a report in this meeting, and somebody say, "But listen, if we break up those 2 channels, or we look at this segment differently, isn't there something going on there?" And then the reporting guys, by the next meeting in the next week, they would have evolved that set of reporting. So I think that's a little bit of a long way to say that there are processes and things that you can put in place inside of a business, and you can change the language and the discourse in the business. And it's not necessarily to say, listen, there are certain types of people that are naturally sort of data driven. You need to find those people. I think you can actually change a culture with, sort of, for lack of a better word, normal people to have a data driven process, but that does require a bit of leadership.
So is it, I mean, you said that there's lots of companies out there which presumably have got massive amounts of potential, but you won't invest in just because the leadership is old fashioned, I suppose. They're not particularly data centric. What sort of markers are you looking out for when you're talking to them?
I think the unfortunate challenge with successful old businesses is that they are successful old businesses. So they've got these business models that's worked for them forever and a day. You've got managers that sit there and you sort of start challenging the goose that lays the golden egg at your peril. It's quite a dangerous and brave career move to make. So it's quite and therefore those companies take a long time to change if new disruptive business models come along, and that is the opportunity for new businesses that do come along. One of the things that's quite important is first principles thinking. So if you step back from a problem and you look at a problem in sort of first principles, then data becomes a lot more important. So where are these levers that we pull? What fundamentally is it that we need to do here? And then to be honest about your existing business models. And do you need to evolve those business models? One of the most famous examples in the world would be Netflix. To evolve through fundamentally different business models, go from a DVD mailing service to a streaming service to now a content production service, and creating massive value through that process. And their founder, Reed Hastings, Netflix was his second business. And one of the things that he wanted to change from his first business was to have first principle thinkers. Elon Musk is also very famous for placing a high amount of value on first principles. Our team in Rain, our Rain telco, they are incredible with first principle thinking, with looking at where the future is going to evolve, how it's going to evolve, very strong engineers, very data driven, and then make extremely, I think, robust decisions. That's data driven.
So first principle thinking is coming through. What else are you seeing in the organizations that you've run successfully and the ones that you're investing in? Are there consistencies in terms of, I guess, attributes or styles of leadership that you can sort of nail your flag on and say they are significantly increasing their odds of actually using data successfully here?
They're all quite good with technology, I must say. They all have reasonably sort of modern and good systems, and they've got the ability to wield that technology very well, and that's not a trivial thing to do.
And is that typically cloud? This is typically, they've made the shift. They've put a lot of care and consideration to how their data is stored and managed.
Yes, in a big way. I mean, if you take, Rain and Batiste and Time, they are all the data are sort of cloud-based. It's available throughout the business. There's one source of truth. They've got very strong data science teams that work on that data. The one aspect of all of this is that it is actually quite hard to build a data science team. The data scientists, very similar to senior software developers, is a very specific breed. And one of the mistakes I've made when I went to Australia is I didn't carefully think through the employment proposition for the data scientists. So you need to be very careful as to how do you shape that employment proposition so that you can attract high quality people and then put them to work in a sort of productive way. And part of that work is setting up the infrastructure, which is not trivial. Infrastructure would be the cloud setup and the data lakes and the tools that you use to analyze the data, and then also how you deploy it inside the organization. And the deployment inside the organization then depends on your managers inside the organization to be data driven, to actually embrace it.
Do we have those types of skills in South Africa to do this, or is this something we're now really going to have to unfortunately look overseas and pay premium dollar or pound or euro rates for?
South Africans are very, very innovative and very scrappy. It's one thing that we probably sort of speculate as to why that is. So we've got a very large number of very scrappy, very talented data scientist consulting firms. So that's one thing that you can do. There's people that are actually very good at building a wide range of things. If you are a company and you're not going on this route, the first quite difficult question that you've got to answer is, do good data scientists want to work for me? And this is a mistake that I made personally in Australia. I tried to create a data science team, but my data science team just wasn't very good. It took me years to realize that they didn't want to work for a two-bit insurance company. So I eventually got a very talented consulting firm, and they came to work inside our business. If you take Rain, I think we're fortunate in that it's an incredibly attractive place for data scientists to work. So we can attract very high quality data scientists to work inside of Rain. So if you know our business, that's the first question that you need to answer. And let's say you struggle to attract high quality data scientists, and you're going to have to find a way to work with a consulting firm to come in and sort of establish your models and help you build what needs to be built, and then maybe you can have an internal team that does the maintenance around that. But I think the key thing is to start with the employment proposition. What is it that you can offer these people? And it's not only money. The money needs to be okay, but it's who they're going to work on, what's the kind of problems that they're going to work on, what's the infrastructure that they're going to work on, are they going to be empowered, are they going to be listened to inside the business in terms of the decisions that needs to be made.
Yeah, see, there's questions actually just coming in from the audience there. I mean, is it as simple as that though? I mean, if I'm running a really boring financial services company, I'm just never going to get good quality data scientists because I can't do these things. I can pay them, but I can't give them interesting problems. I can't give them things that are going to wow them. I'm actually essentially going to have to go down the consultancy route.
Okay, I mean, you've now used the example of a financial services business. If you are going to use technology and data science in your financial services, and if you have the right culture, then you're probably going to do some disruptive things through the use of this data. That's an interesting problem. Therefore, you can attract data scientists. I think where it's harder is, let's say you've got a manufacturing business, and you've got a whole bunch of plant with a bunch of equipment that manufactures things, and there's not that many opportunities to deploy data science, but there is very specific instances, then I would go to a consulting firm. When an example is there's a consulting firm in Cape Town, and they specialize in manufacturing. And it sounds very obvious in retrospect, but if you have manufacturing equipment that's been sort of bought anywhere in the last 15 to 20 years, there's a significant number of sensors on this manufacturing equipment. And how each one of those sensors work is that they've got a tolerance range. So let's say the humidity or the acidity or the temperature or whatever goes out of whack, then the red light goes off and the thing stops, and you've got to fix that instance first. So what this data scientist firm did is they took all of that data and they looked at the interactions of all of those things. And it turns out there's many instances where the temperature is still in range, the acidity is still in range, and the humidity is still in range, but that particular combination of those things don't work, and then there's a problem. And in a manganese manufacturing plant or processing plant, they brought the error rate down from 5% to 0.5%. Massive difference on existing data that sits there, that you basically just needed to go and look at what the correlations were. I thought that's quite a sort of fascinating example.
Okay. I think it was when we chatted a week or two ago, we were going through some of the other, I don't know, I'm going to call it the cheat sheet for people that want to start actually using data in their organizations. You talk about talent multipliers, and I thought this was fascinating. Do you want to just go into the details on that?
There's two things: there's talent multiplier and talent density, which is two things that I absolutely love. The first time I got around the term talent multiplier was in a book by Laszlo Bock called Work Rules. So Laszlo Bock was the head of people at Google for something like 15 years from the very early days. And I think this book is an absolute gift. He just, in a very raw fashion, wrote down everything that they learned at Google through all the years in terms of HR and how you manage people and how you recruit and all of those kind of things. And one of their beliefs is that a really talented software engineer is worth 100 average engineers. And I think for data scientists, a really talented data scientist, you can't replace with 1,000 mediocre data scientists. So if you are going to employ these kind of people, you really need to go after the talent in terms of getting the best people that you can get. And if you can't get the best people because you can't employ them because they don't want to work for you, you've got to insource that from a vendor where the vendor's got an employment proposition that they do want to work on because maybe there's more things to work on. So that's the talent multiplier. And I mean, we had a look in one of our companies the other day, and let's say there was a budget for 90,000 Rand, and there was a guy on the market and he's 110,000 Rand. If that guy is going to take you from average to really outstanding, that 20,000 Rand is absolutely meaningless. You should get the guy that talent multiplier is very strong. And then the talent density thing is I think an even more interesting phenomenon. The first time again that I heard about that was Reed Hastings at Netflix. He had a rocky patch at some point in the early days of Netflix, and he had to retrench a whole bunch of people. And then suddenly, after he retrenched these people, Netflix just rocketed. And his reflection on it was, in the retrenchment process, he looked at who he wanted to retrench, and implicitly retrenched the people with lower talent. And what remained was higher talent density, so more talent on average per person. One of the businesses that I'm invested in had a similar thing with lockdown, where they had to let a whole bunch of people go. At like half the size today, they're more profitable than they ever were. And I strongly believe it's the talent density that has gone up. So I think recruitment is important, but it's also very important to go and have a look at what's your talent per seat. And make sure you don't have, I mean, this sounds very Machiavellian, but make sure you don't have seats in your company that's wasted by people of average talent in those seats.
So I can see now where you were going when you were saying there's lots of companies with leadership teams that you'd best avoid, because this is going to be really tough for traditional leaders. You want to go and minimize the talent pool, so keep it lean, I suppose, keep it mean. You're looking for specific individuals that can be multiplicative in what they actually do, 10x, 100x, and presumably you've got to pay them way outside the normal standards and odds that a sort of Hayes market survey or an HR team would normally be comfortable for. So I can imagine you're talking about some, properly committed leaders to actually go through this. You also say that you need mavericks. And to Chris's point, if you can repeat the book name as well before I forget to ask that one, because I'm sure others want to look at that.
It's I'll post it here in the chat. The writer is Laszlo Bock, and the book's name is Work Rules. Exceptional piece of writing to read. It's very, very worthwhile on talent management. And I mean, we are the AI Fund. We spend a lot of time on helping companies with talent management. I think. One of my beliefs is that recruitment is the single most important thing that a manager does and a CEO does. It's more important even than what the company actually does, because if you don't recruit well, then you're going to have low talent density, and then you're so hamstrung, it's going to be very difficult to succeed.
Now, what's this that you need mavericks in the team as well?
The Maverick thing is quite specific to Rain. So at Rain, in the Rain credo is that we embrace Mavericks. I'm not sure that's applicable to every business, but sort of a Maverick is the definition of a Maverick. I think is an orthodox person. It's a person that thinks differently, and they might even be difficult. So at Rain, we say that there's lots of times we have Mavericks. That's people that potentially is quite difficult to work with. They're quite quirky, and we actually embrace them. I think that's one part of it. The other part which I believe quite strongly is that you shouldn't define seniority by management. So if you've got somebody that's really strong at doing something, their career path should not be now managing people if they're not good at managing people. Managing people is just a skill set like anything else. And I think if you are in a business and there's individual contributors, like an engineer that just codes and he earns more than his manager, that's a very healthy sign. I think the moment you get into a business where the only path is sort of climbing up the corporate ladder in terms of hierarchy, you would have heard that thing, the Peter principle. people get promoted until they get into a position that they're incompetent to perform, and then they just sit there. It's a very big waste to take individual contributors that's really strong, and then I'll make them manage people, and they're not good with it.
All right, I'm going to get told off if I don't start asking some of these questions that we've got coming in now. So let's kick off. Rob Jackson says, how do you convince CEOs to invest in their data for competitive advantage? I think he's making a big generalism on the next point. Most techies are not equipped to do that. I'm sure their techies are going to argue against that. But how do you do that?
I've got maybe a bit of a cynical answer on that. Is you pitch it, and if you don't succeed, then you change companies. If you want to be in the space, you're going to have to be in a company that inspires you, where the leadership inspires you, where the leadership sort of leads the process. I mean, I was lucky in my career, but if I look back at lots of the things that we achieved, it was due to very strong leadership above me that drove those changes. When I spent some time at First Rand, and Johan Berger and Paul Harris in particular pushed through what was at the time incredibly brave quantitative changes inside of the business done by very young people, and that's leadership. And maybe the cynical point is try, and if you can't do it, go and find a CEO that can do it, that wants to do it.
Question from Tony. How do you identify people with this high talent multiplier? I'm assuming it's just not obvious from the CV and the resume.
So in a lot of businesses that we're involved with, we've got extreme recruitment processes. So the one part that I'm not that I think we're still lacking on is the sourcing side, as to how do we actually get those people. But once they in our recruitment process, then we would have a whole bunch of steps. We'd have what we call a sort of a culture questionnaire. So somebody actually fills out a answer set to probably about 35 different questions that tests them on various cultural aspects. So we ask them what's the biggest failure that they've had, or who's the greatest person they've worked with, and you get a sense of where they'll fit into your culture. That's very important. I'm not a very big believer on interviews, but we do have interviews, and we need to have, I think, at least 4 interviews to get a sort of a proper view on a person. And then we design tests. So a person will come in, and there'll be a whole host of things that they will do that's quite specific to their job. One of them is an inbox exercise. So they'll sit down at a computer, and they'll have a whole bunch of emails that they need to respond to. And they don't have enough time actually to get to all of them. And this is a 4-hour exercise. And they need to deal with everything from client problems to, in our analytics business, what was quite amazing is we had this 80-page deck, PowerPoint deck, that they needed to fix. And what you literally did afterwards, just counted the number of fixes that they did. So what would have been wrong in this thing, there would be, let's say, scales on graphs that's wrong, whether it be font problems, or there'd be just misspellings and those kind of things. And what was amazing was how high the correlation was between the number of fixes somebody did and how capable they ultimately were. And then, so it's a very, very robust recruitment process. And then a very strong realization that a false positive does a lot more damage than a false negative. So if you appoint the wrong person, you are in for hell. And everybody will know that, like for 9 months plus, because it'll take you a long time to actually get to the point where you make peace with the fact that you now appointed the wrong person. He's occupying this seat, is sort of destroying the work of the people around him. And then you've got to get to exit that person. So your recruitment process needs to be very, very strong on avoiding false positives. And if you lose a few good people in the process because your recruitment process is too severe, that's not so bad.
What do you do with them when they arrive? So you've gone to this huge amount of effort to filter and to pull in the best. Now, how do you make sure over those first 3 to 6 months that they blossom, that you really learn what they're about?
I've got a little bit of a simplistic view. It feels to me like the speed that somebody arrives in an organization has got a big impact on setting their speed for the next period. So very keen on a very good landing process. If the person lands, they're properly inducted into the organization, they've got the tools that they need to work with, they are empowered quite quickly, and they get running quite quickly. I mean, I'm all for ping pong tables and coffee and all of those kind of things, and it makes the workplace good. But ultimately, people want to work with great other people. They want to work on problems that's worth solving, and they want to learn and be empowered to do their own work. And you need to get them quite quickly into doing meaningful work.
You mentioned credo a little while back. So a charter, a credo, a 6 to 10 point piece of paper you can wave around with a list of things in terms of what you want for the characteristics of your staff. Is this a bit gimmicky, or do you believe in it and you think it works?
I think values are gimmicky. So there's sort of the 3 values. We are trustworthy, innovative, and fun, or whatever those values were. And if you're going to look at the likes of everybody from Steinhoff to Enron, and you're going to look at, they've got value statements. It's not like they live those value statements. So what we've done in, I think, about 12 of the organizations that we are invested in is help them develop a credo. So a credo is a sort of a statement of beliefs. Some of them are quite long. I think one of them is about 36 different statements. And the statement, and I mean, what's amazing to me is that you'll have different companies and that are very successful with very different cultures. So you must realize there's no magic culture. The culture that you've got inside of your organization is right for your people doing your kind of work. But what we then do in that credo is to write down how we believe what is the best way of doing something. And it's everything from, let's say you believe there should be a single source of truth on data, then that might be a belief that you've got. And you then write down what that actually means inside the organization. So what the credo then allows you to do, let's say you're a new person coming into the organization, Colin, and I'm going to work now with you. I know what to expect from you because I know you've signed up to the credo. Like in the recruitment process, you've actually read the credo, you've been inducted into the credo. So there's a certain set of behavior that I expect from you, which means I immediately trust you more, and it's more smooth between us. And in the absence of a credo, let's say you and I are coming at a problem from 2 different perspectives because that's what we believe the right ways of coming at it. In the absence of a credo, we now have an interpersonal conflict. With a credo, we can refer to the credo as sort of the third-party agreed standard as to this is how we tackle the problem, and that sort of smooths things out quite a bit. So if you take somebody like Ray Dalio's company, one of the most successful investment companies in the world, Bridgewater, their version of a credo is their principles, which is this incredibly dense set of operating procedures that they've written up over a long period of time. I like sort of the Netflix example a bit more, which is a set of statements with some text to it as to what it means, and it's something that you can read in 10 to 20 minutes. But it needs to be as detailed as it needs to be for your specific business. You shouldn't simplify it beyond what is necessary.
Would you, or have you fired people that you feel that aren't living up to the credo that they've essentially signed up to? Even if they're like the best salesperson, they're actually super in terms of their activities, but they're just not living to the credo.
A sign of a good culture is that the culture ejects people that are inconsistent with the culture. If your culture is weak and there's somebody that is inside the business and they behave inconsistently with the culture and they don't get ejected, you've got a weak culture. It's almost like the immune system in your body. You've got like germs coming in, but your immune system is not strong enough to push them out. So if we sit on boards or we discuss, or we hear what's happening in the company and we hear people get fired because they didn't act consistently with the credo, that's a good sign.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, I get the feeling again when you're looking at the senior leadership teams of a lot of companies, one of the observations is you can actually have a look at that culture and you can see the bad apples sitting there, and they talk about the credo or the values that they've got, but actually it's just lipstick on a pig and they don't really live to it. And that must be a big turnoff in terms of investment opportunities, a big giveaway.
Yeah, and that kind of thing, in the fullness of time, you struggle more and more to appoint good people, and it just creates a massive sort of downward cycle. Whereas if you can have a strong culture, strong people, new people coming in, sort of lifting the standard the whole time, that's quite a self-reinforcing positive flywheel to get onto.
Let's take a quick turn now back to some more data-related pieces. So a lot of culture. Maybe we'll come back to that. This one, I don't know. I think we're just going to slot it in here. I don't know if we'll get to a theme which we can slot it in, but it's a great question from Fatke. As a new entrant in the market, how do you acquire data to build, train in your models? And is Papaya, or is it Poppy? I don't know. There's a debate by itself, isn't it? But is it Poppy? Is it still possible to actually get the data you need to train?
I mean, there's fascinating things to do. If you are in the banking space, for example, legislation requires everybody that provides credit to give the data to the credit bureaus. So, strangely enough, credit data is not really a competitive advantage for a bank. It's the data that you can put around that data. And it is tricky when you start a business and you don't have access to your own data. So then you've got to be a little bit scrappy. In rain, for example, we are going through a vendor that at satellite imagery. On the satellite imagery, they will look at houses, and they've modeled out of the satellite imagery. They can sort of put values on houses, which then, if you overlay that with a network map, you can get a sense of what the market looks like and any site that you might put up. So that's external data, and then there's all kinds of other data that you can buy externally from third parties that you can then overlay on that and build quite a rich model. The other example that's absolutely fascinating is a company in Centurion called Merlin, and they've got this AI model that they call Tom. So Tom basically builds an AI model based on an expert that you've got inside of your business. So let's say you've got an expert, and this expert needs to look at a certain case. And Tom gets used, for example, in the US, it gets used at border control. So there's a certain set of data, and then your expert says, with this data, I would do this. And then Tom will give him another set of data, and the expert will make decisions that Tom serves up. As the expert makes these decisions, Tom learns from the expert, and at some point tells you that he can now accurately emulate the expert in 90 or 95% of the cases. And then you can take Tom and you can deploy Tom. You can go and multiply your expert, because you can put your expert down in a whole bunch of different places. So that's quite a great example. If you don't have data, but you've got some experts internally that can actually make a call on a set of things out of their experience, and then go and roll that out into the real world.
So a slight disadvantage, but you can work around it. Shane says, data-driven decision-making has been very successful in the direct risk life insurance sector. Can it solve for complexity, or would that niche market belong to traditional F2F models? Do you get the question? If not, we'll call him up.
No, I think so. I think insurance traditionally works through brokers. So the insurance company doesn't necessarily use their own distribution. I think F2F means face-to-face. So you've got a broker that goes out, and the broker now meets the client and sign them up. And that channel historically has created a lot of friction, because the broker wants the relationship with the client. They want to be able to set pricing or discount the local golf buddy or whatever the case may be. And they don't want to, there's a lack of information coming back from the broker, and there's resistance to any technology that you put in there to improve that situation. And for a traditional insurance company, it's very difficult to move away from that. So the likes of OUTsurance have been hugely disruptive, because they didn't use the middlemen, and they did their own advertising, and by doing that, they created a sort of a value chain that was very powerful. So I think if you're now in a niche market, you would have to go and look at, in everything that they do, where's my opportunities? What can I change, given that this is my chosen niche market? And a lot of that many times is in the incentive structures. is in changing the way that you're incentivizing these brokers that are competing, showing things like, I mean, if you're in the insurance industry, you'll know things like leaderboards, having competitions, all of those kind of things. On the underwriting side, there's most likely ways to underwrite better, get better outcomes. Insurance, one of the most important things is retention. It's just hanging on to clients longer. So go and deploy data to see which clients are at risk of leaving you. How do you get them back in? But a lot of these things is just shining lights on it, like being very clear as to what are my key metrics. So, you know, in this niche insurance company, where's my big levers? Do I have lights on it? Do I know every single week where I'm at? If I wake up my key guy at 2 o'clock in the morning and I ask him what's the retention rate, does he have it at his fingertips? Later on, you can get to more sophisticated stuff, but just to shine lights on it.
What's happening over the actually before that, I got a question. I almost forgot. Peter sent me a question. Peter Swiggers there. Solving data-related problems is exciting. Can be quite creative. Engineers love doing that sort of stuff. And I know exactly where he's coming from here. One of the problems that you can run into is how you go and scale these lovely creative ideas. Have you run into that problem where, you know, it looks great in those first prototypes and experiments, but actually the scaling process, so it's taking it from whatever, a few thousand to a couple of million people, is actually the biggest headache of all?
The scaling is, I think, harder than the design. Like, you can have a creative product, but actually scaling things up is very hard. And the complexity that comes with scale is very hard. And that's where I think the technology is actually quite important. So from day one, to build things in a way that can actually scale. And it's not trivial. There's a saying that I really love: slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. So it is worthwhile making sure you've got your process in place, that you've got your systems in place, that you test things and smoothly scale. And if you smoothly scale, then you'll probably be able to scale faster. But there's no I don't think there's no silver bullets. It's a hard thing. There's an interview with Elon Musk in April by Chris Anderson, and one of the things that he said is anybody can design an electric car. It's significantly harder designing a manufacturing process to produce those cars at scale. So I think it's similar to your question.
Presumably this is getting easier now, though, with cloud.
Yes.
The software as a service add-ons which are coming in, which are helping on these things.
Yes, and being able to connect things and having mobile devices out and instant feedback and all of those kind of things. And again, it comes back to culture. What does your organization celebrate? Do they celebrate just the good ideas and the crazy product ideas and those kind of things, or do they actually celebrate the operational excellence of scaling it up? If you look at what organizations celebrate, you'll see what they are good at. And there's no scaled organization that's not excellent at operational excellence, and where they actually celebrate operational excellence.
That is, yeah. There's a few things I'd like to say there, which I probably can't. Maybe we'll chat about that another time. So, what have I taken away so far, aside from the culture side of things? If we look back to the late 90s to where today, there's been this incredible transformation in terms of technology. I mean, you've presented on this before, and I've just been, I mean, the figures are just mind-blowing. We are talking exponential multiples in terms of processing power that we're able to do, and the improvements that we get from cloud and Internet of Things and a gazillion and one other technologies. And we've also got this additive benefit where they're all converging and assisting each other. So as data prices come down and cloud becomes cheaper and more available and accessible, and therefore our calc can increase and the models get better, and then our data sets are more, and we've got IoT that's throwing even more data into it. And so we're in this really virtuous circle of technology to bring us to 2022. So I think it's impossible to argue with your view that data-led organizations have a massive advantage compared to others. And I certainly agree with your view. From my experience, there's a lot of companies that somehow miss it because their leadership team isn't grasping it. My kind of intro there to this question is, what happens from here? Have we kind of reached some sort of peak now where it's difficult to see things can carry on changing at this speed and scale?
I think the rate of change will keep on increasing. I think
it's going to get faster.
It's going to get faster. I think you're going to see a lot more decimation of companies that don't adapt. I think there's a host of very, very strong macro trends that are all converging. And I mean, at the CrossFit conference, we talked about artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is basically sort of data-driven decision making in its sort of broadest sense. You've got connectivity, and connectivity means there's data coming in from everywhere. We take our medical technology business. The stuff that healthcare professionals use produces a lot of data. It's very, very easy and quick now to pull that into the cloud, get an algorithm from somewhere to interpret it. Internet of Things, like all of these devices everywhere and how that gets together. The payment space is quite fascinating. We don't really know where the metaverse is going to end up and what all the use case in the metaverse is going to be, but payments are going to be quite important in the metaverse. It'll be quite a huge part of enabling the metaverse. Augmented and virtual reality. We, in our medical technology business, we're rolling out augmented reality where you actually simulate a difficult medical procedure with the team using actual augmented reality, which is significantly better than what they did in the past, where recently they did 3D printing and those kind of things, but it was much harder to actually sort of simulate the operation. Autonomous vehicles of all kinds, not only the ones that drive on the road. That leads sort of into robotics, blockchain, and everything from crypto and DeFi that enables. And then again, back in the medical space, genomics, which is basically a sort of a data play. So I think what all of that means is that the kinds of people that you need to employ inside your organization need to be quite strong generalists. They need to be at least across a lot of these things and how these things work together. And I think the other fascinating thing, one of the very sore lessons I've learned, I was part of a group of investors that bought Mixit. So a lot of people remember Mixit. Mixit was the biggest social network on the planet before Facebook and all those came along. They were very strong on feature phones, and there was a very short space of time where they missed the whole smartphone thing. They took too long to get onto the smartphone thing. And in that space, it's a winner takes it all model, and they got killed by WhatsApp. So now going into a business, you've got to be very careful of winner takes it all environments. It's great to be the winner, but then you need to make sure you're the winner. Otherwise, by definition, you're going to lose. But at the same time, there's a Chris Becker of NASPASH. He talks about he calls it a cultural curtain, like businesses that exist geographically behind a sort of a cultural curtain where it's sort of protected in that sense. And geography is quite a fascinating thing. It's like the world is not really flat, right? There's a lot of businesses in South Africa. The competition is not going to come here. You're going to have your space here. You can operate in your space and build a very attractive business in your space because of the fact that you are in South Africa and into Africa. So I think it's a strange convergence of what does your competitive landscape look like? What sort of competitive moats do you have, and how do you at least sort of benefit from a rising tide on all of these converging technologies, and at best like surf them and really do well out of them?
Yeah. That is the question. I think there's a lot of people, there's a minority of people I think that are going to get that right, but they're going to win the spoils. And there's a majority, particularly on the legacy organizations, that really need to try a hell of a lot harder to get onto this, especially if what you've said about this acceleration getting faster is actually the pace. And I happen to believe that you're 100% correct. Shiona, over to you.
Thank you, Colin and Roger, for a really insightful and very, very interesting session. I mean, it sounds easy enough, Roger, change the culture and change the business model. Hopefully we'll have our African continent responding well to that to reap the benefits of the technology moving forward. To all our attendees, thank you so much for joining. Please keep an eye out for our next session, and thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Roger. See you again in a month or so.
Thanks, Shiona.